So far I've looked at Hornby and Hornby 00 Wren models, and now I'm going to look at various other brands including Mainline, Dapol or Dapol, Bachmann and Lima, and give you my views on these. First of all, here is an ex-Airfix, Mainline or Dapol, I'm not sure which, N2. Hornby took over the model and eventually produced it with a newer 5-pole motor. Now in theory this should be a great model. The bodywork is super and it's got 6-wheel pickup and a 5-pole motor, so in theory should be great. In practice I'm afraid it's a real dog. I've just tested it. All the wheels are spotlessly clean. It picks up from all 6 wheels, and yet it's just not a very good runner. There's something about the chassis that is, I don't know, it's like, although it picks up from 6 wheels, not all 6 wheels are touching the track at any one time. It's really weird. And it stops for no good reason on an electrofrog points. So I really can't recommend the ex-Airfix N2. Should be great on paper, but in practice it's just not a very good runner. And I'm saying it's not just this model. I've owned 3 or 4. They've all been noisy. They've struggled with second radius curves. They don't pull a great deal. They're certainly not up to pulling the Ellis Clark Quad Art coaches, apparently, which is what they would have pulled in real life out of King's Cross. I think it really needs another manufacturer to produce a brand new model of this with a decent chassis. That's what lets it down. I think the bodywork is great, but the chassis just doesn't work properly. Here is a Bachmann J72. Now Bachmann produced a newer version a few years ago, but the original version, which was based on an old mainline model, came out in about 1991, I'm guessing, something like that. Now it has what's called a split chassis, which means it's quite fiddly if you want to adapt it for DCC running, but if you're just happy with DC running, it's not bad loco at all. I'll just show you it's capable of quite smooth running really, if it's been well looked after. So perfect sort of for a station pilot, for a shunter. And pretty quiet. This of all the J72s I've got, and I have got 4 of them, this is the best, because they have produced an awful lot of these over the years, and as I say, it's based on the old mainline model. Now the Bachmann model has a split chassis, so did the mainline version, and I'll show you a mainline model. So here it is. This is the original mainline version. This probably came out in the late 1970s, and at the time it was really setting high standards for just detail and so on. And it's got 6-wheel pickup. That started off quite well then. I would have noticed with my mainline locomotives is they improve the more you run them. They take a few minutes to warm up. So it's almost like if you want to use them for shunting, do a few laps of your track first. This one is running pretty well now, but that is literally after about a minute of running in, and it always needs a minute of running in. When I first set it off, it stalls, it judders, it wobbles, and it actually, maybe you can see a slight wobble there. What these locomotives often suffer from is a split axle. So the chassis was split. There was a gap between the 2 halves of the chassis. One half picked up from one rail, the other from the other rail, and so the wheels picked up and were in direct contact with the chassis. There were no wiper pickups, and the middle of the axle was plastic, and this plastic tended to break rather easily. And so you get somewhere, yes, the plastic is just about holding the wheels together, but not very well, and so you get a click and a wobble and so on. I might be able to show you that if I've got an example. Right, here's another mainline J72, straight off my shelf. I haven't run it for months. Let's see what it's like. Oh, wrong controller. Okay, you can see a bit juddery. At least it started straight away. It's stalled in reverse. Oh no, there it goes. You can see it's much more jerky, and that is typical of a J72 from mainline when it hasn't been warmed up. That's actually on full power now, if I get it coming forwards. And I'll try and crawl slowly backwards, and you can see it's stalled. That's an electrofrog point, so I didn't actually touch it, but you can see it's very jerky, and that's the problem you sometimes get with mainline models. They can be very noisy. Sometimes they can be as smooth as anything. Other times, really, the gears literally grind, and I would avoid mainline models if I were you. But their locomotives, that is, their coaches and their wagons are fantastic. But I'd avoid the locomotives if I were you. Another one that I'm not quite sure you should go for is Airfix. Airfix made a mixture of loco drive and tender drive models. In fact, their tender locomotives were tender drive, but the tank engines were loco drive. And I've got one to show you. And this was one of the first locomotives I bought. In fact, this is the oldest one in my fleet. It is an Airfix 6100 class, Great Western Large Prairie, and you'll see that it's quite noisy. And a bit wobbly. It's got a real wobble about it. And yeah, I mean, I've kept this because it's got sentimental value for me, but I wouldn't call it a particularly good runner. Again, though, when they came out in the 1970s, late 70s, people thought Airfix, wow, the bodywork was fantastic compared with what Hornby were producing at the time. So it was a bit of a step forward. And they boasted that a 5-pole motor, but unfortunately, a poorly designed chassis combined with a 5-pole motor does not necessarily give you a good running locomotive. Anyway, Airfix, I would probably avoid their locomotives, particularly the 1400 class. It's a little GWR 042 tank engine, and they are extremely hit and miss, more miss than hit. Occasionally you'll get one that runs well, but they had an enormous 5-pole motor in them, but it really unbalanced a small tank engine. It put a lot of the weight on the rear undriven wheels, and just not very good. So, to sum up then, if you're looking for good running, good value locomotives, a lot of the sort of Hornby models from the 70s, 80s, 90s can be acquired very cheaply and are pretty good runners. The older ones are quite easy to service. Avoid triang-based models, and if you want to look out for them, they won't have any proper handrails. It'll all be moulded plastic. They won't run on modern track at all well. They'll bump along over the points and things like that. Yeah, later Hornby, fantastic. Bachmann, the more recent Bachmann, I think a great value. From the mid-90s onwards, I have got some. In fact, I'll just go and fetch another one for you. Here we have a V1, or is it V3 tank engine? I'm not sure which. Beautiful livery, and I think this was made in the late 90s, and again, cost me, I think, less than £40. They have more recently produced a model with a DCC-ready chassis, but this is the old split chassis. But this one seems to be a pretty good, quiet, smooth runner. So, you can certainly pick up some excellent models from Bachmann for not much money. Hornby and Bachmann, they're the two leaders. Dapol, I call it Dapol. I've got a model that was designed by Dapol and is now made by Hornby, which is their J94 tank engine, and it runs pretty well. But this is the Hornby version, so. But it's basically the same mechanism. He says, I haven't run it for ages, and it's wobbling a bit. I think it needs a bit of looking into. There's something wobbly there. I think one of the, yeah, that's not a great demonstration for you. Something there is not right. I shall have a look at that. I would say probably Dapol mechanisms, good idea in theory. They weren't quite up to standard. This is talking about the 1980s and 1990s models. They make some very good diesels and steam engines nowadays, but they're a lot more expensive. The J94 actually is pretty reliable. Mine, I think, one of the wheel, yeah, I can see it there. I don't know if you can see that. That wheel looks like it's come out of alignment. The wheel tread it needs to be pushed back in. And I remember this was a problem with this particular model that I've got. And so I need to adjust that a bit and get the wheel tread back in. When you're buying second-hand, of course, there are always possible problems like this. Yeah. And it also needs to be cleaned. That's already looking a bit smoother. It's not wobbling so much. But the wheels do need to be cleaned. It's got a little bit of a rock still. Now, my little Hornby X-Dapol J94 tank engine, I've adjusted the wheels, and I think it now is running pretty smoothly. Yeah, minor fault. The wheel tyres were slightly loose on a couple of the wheels. Squeeze them back into place, and it's running beautifully. And you can pick up a Hornby J94 for about £40 off eBay. You may pay a little bit more for certain ones. Some are very popular because they've got certain livery, but this one was about 40, maybe £45, but a super runner. I mentioned that Lima diesels were pretty good value, reliable and good runners. Here is one of my favourites. It's a Deltic Tullyar. It was one of the later Lima models, and they re-geared the motor, or they some redesigned the motor so it didn't go quite so fast. Yeah, and you'll find lots of Lima Deltics on eBay. It was mass-produced. It was one of their most popular models. It was their first diesel model, I think. Their second diesel model after the Class 33, which they produced in HO scale originally. That's one to look out for, actually. If you want a 00 gauge model, try and avoid the HO scale Lima Class 33. But the Deltic's a nice model, and from normal viewing distances it looks just as good as the far more expensive ones. This one cost me about £40. I'll get it going. A fairly smooth start. And on the other line, I've got a Class 40 by Lima. These Lima diesels, the one thing you really need to do to make sure they run well is to keep the track clean and keep the wheels clean. They often only pick up from 2 wheels on each side. You can add extra pickups if you want, but they do have traction tyres. Now, some people don't like traction tyres, but for the money we're paying for these, traction tyres are just a necessary evil, really. This one cost me, I think it was between £40 and £50. I can't quite remember. But it's a pretty good runner. I haven't even cleaned the wheels on it recently, so let's just see how it starts off. Not bad at all. So, a few things to think about then if you're looking to buy some second-hand locomotives. First of all, if you're buying off eBay, don't rush. Don't see the first model you'd like look of and bid ridiculous amounts for it. Be wary of buy it now as well, because sometimes buy it now offers on second-hand locomotives can be nearly as much as for brand new ones. And I tend to more go for auctions than buy it now. But occasionally you'll find someone who is trying to sell a large number of things. Let's say it's their grandfather's collection of locomotives and they just want them out of the house as quickly as possible. And you might find that there are some very good buy it now prices. Otherwise, you probably have to bid to get a low price. And what to look out for, just another reminder, I would be careful when I'm looking at a description. If the person selling the locomotive says something like would benefit from a service, then that might often mean it's a very poor runner at the moment, and it might take more than just a bit of oiling and cleaning of wheels to get it running well. So I might steer clear of that. And also, if someone doesn't mention whether it runs very well or not, I might be a bit wary of that as well. If it's an absolute bargain anyway, you might want to take a risk, and if it turns out that the locomotive doesn't run very well, you can always sell it on. But if you're me, then you'd always be very honest in your selling, and you'd say, actually, it's not a very good runner. If the person has described something as a good runner, then that's quite encouraging. Although occasionally some person's idea of a good runner means, oh, it'll do 200 miles an hour, and that's the only speed it'll do. So you might not agree with that. But of course, with eBay, as a buyer, you do have your statutory rights. If something is missold, misrepresented, you can get all your money back anyway. But also, if you buy something and you want to return it, you are entitled to do so. I think there are some people who say no returns on their selling, but I believe that goes against British retail law. I could be wrong on that. But basically, if something's wrong, you can return it, certainly. And even if something's just not quite right, you should be able to return it. Or if not, come to an agreement with the person you bought it from. Don't spend a fortune. What to look out for then? Good Hornby models. Avoid Triang. The wheels will be too lumpy and big. They won't go through track. Good Hornby models, particularly tender drive locomotives. They're easy to maintain and repair, even though they're not the finest of detail. They'll run pretty well, not perfect. They might be a bit noisier than some modern locomotives, but there's no real problem there. Likewise, Lima, their diesels are excellent. They need a bit of maintenance, keep the wheels clean, but you can normally get them to run pretty well. Other makes, as I said earlier, Wren, quite expensive, especially if they're in mint condition, but sometimes you can pick up a less good-looking one without a box, and they've got very sturdy mechanisms, so you should get a decent runner out of that. Other makes, Mainline and Airfix, bit more hit and miss with the quality of the running, so don't pay too much money for them. And if you're not prepared to take that risk, well, steer clear of them. Bachmann, pretty reliable. Some of their earlier locomotives did suffer from split axles, but on the whole, some very good, nice-looking locomotives there. So good luck if you've not bought anything second-hand before, or if you're just looking out for a few more bargains. If you go on eBay, you definitely find some very good models at very low prices. The alternative, of course, is if you go to a railway exhibition or a toy fair, and often on those occasions you can get a chance. You have a chance to see something running. I certainly buy things occasionally from the Ipswich Railway Modelers Association open days, and they will test the locomotive on a layout, and so you can see it running. And of course, don't rush into buying the first thing you see. You might suddenly find at another stall there's something much better for less money. Anyway, enjoy your model railways, and I hope you found this video useful. Bye for now.